Chris Martin's heartfelt hug for SUGA at a US airport has the world buzzing. Could this be the beginning of an emotional Coldplay x BTS reunion? While Jungkook and Jimin remained behind the lens, Chris's genuine gesture instantly stirred hearts across fandoms. This is the kind of moment fans never imagined, and now, they can't stop talking about it. The international airport in the United States usually buzzes with business travelers and wandering tourists, but that morning the atmosphere felt different as a quiet tension crept through the arrival terminal. A kind of reverent stillness swept in with the humid outdoor air and settled around the glass-walled corridors, the airport staff more composed than usual, perhaps because they knew who was landing, or perhaps because even they were quietly anticipating something extraordinary. And then came the man in a dark gray shirt and black cap, walking with a mix of nervous energy and steady intent. His body language betraying familiarity with the spotlight, but also a vulnerability reserved for private encounters. Chris Martin, known for his guarded appearances and rarely public gestures, walked through the terminal like someone following an invisible emotional compass. And within moments, another figure emerged from the opposite direction. A shorter man in a beige overshirt, black cap, white face mask, and a black backpack slung over one shoulder, moving quickly with purpose. And as the two spotted each other, the air seemed to tighten. Their recognition instant and silent, no dramatic run, no theatrical wave, just a steady approach and then that hug, not the casual greeting of colleagues but a sincere, weight-bearing embrace that seemed to speak of shared memories, unspoken gratitude, or even relief. Chris's arms encircled SUGA in a firm, lingering grip, his chin tucked down, eyes shut in a private emotional moment, while SUGA, quiet and still, leaned into it with a calm presence that felt remarkably grounded. And though no words were exchanged, everything essential was already being said through that contact. Photographers at a respectful distance captured the embrace without interruption, knowing instinctively that this wasn't a shot to exploit but to witness. And as the moment lingered, subtle movement caught the edge of vision. Two taller figures approaching slowly, one in a gray hoodie and the other in black, easily identifiable as Jungkook and Jimin. Though they remained on the periphery, unseen in the main frame, letting the emotional nucleus between Chris and SUGA take center stage. And soon the space filled with more staff, handlers, and quiet murmurs, but the energy of the hug remained suspended in the air like a chord not yet resolved. And within hours, that single image had circled the globe, fans on social platforms crafting captions that ranged from poetic to speculative. A reunion in silence, a bridge across continents, the hug that healed the hiatus. Though no official statement had been released, no confirmation of a project or performance, the public didn't need press releases to interpret what they saw. They knew this was meaningful, not for its celebrity optics, but for the way it broke the invisible wall between public persona and private humanity. And suddenly Chris Martin wasn't just a frontman of Coldplay but a friend offering something real to someone who had spent years giving himself to the world. And SUGA, usually seen composed and measured, allowed himself to be held without defense, without distraction. And that image was enough to stir a wave of reactions across lifestyle media. From Seoul to New York, each outlet offering its own angle, its own translation of a moment that defied language. Yet still the speculation grew. Was this an emotional welcome or the quiet prelude to something bigger? Perhaps a new Coldplay x BTS collaboration. Perhaps just a personal reunion with no strings attached. But the elegance of the moment lay in its mystery, in the way it invited interpretation without needing to clarify itself. And while the buzz grew louder, those who truly understood chose to sit quietly with the image, feeling its weight, its simplicity, its quiet beauty. The photo may have been frozen in time, but its ripples continued to move outward through the fabric of global media and fan discourse. As newsrooms scrambled to contextualize what they had just witnessed in real time, lifestyle editors and pop culture commentators began weaving narrative threads that were as thoughtful as they were inquisitive, not in the tone of sensational tabloid frenzy, but in the deliberate pacing of a cultural shift quietly unfolding in the terminal of a major American airport. Because when Chris Martin, an icon of global music diplomacy, extends a public embrace to SUGA, a pillar of the BTS legacy and a producer with profound emotional gravity, the gesture can't simply be seen as coincidence or convenience, especially when it occurs within days of renewed conversations surrounding post-military comeback schedules, rumored joint performances, and whispers of major music events that remain unnamed but highly anticipated. and so the narrative moved from one of warmth to one of what next curiosity, as observers began to dissect not only the body language but the context of the hug itself. Why now, why here, and why with such intentional presence, particularly when Jungkook and Jimin, though spotted briefly, maintained deliberate distance from the central image, perhaps by design, perhaps out of respect for a moment that was never meant to be about the group as a whole but about an individual connection long in the making, because Chris and SUGA share more than a stage history. They share an unspoken artistic wavelength that has surfaced before in interviews, lyrics, and collaborative energy that transcends commercial alliances, and this reunion, however brief in duration, reasserted that reality in a way no press junket or live stream ever could. Fans responded not with hysteria but with reverence, their online discussions marked by a noticeable quietude, as if trying to preserve the integrity of what they had just seen rather than immediately mimify or overanalyze it. Still, theories emerged in thoughtful tones, some pointing out the timing with the rumored music video shoot in Los Angeles involving unnamed global artists. Others referencing SUGA's past interview where he said Chris was one of the few people in the industry he could talk to without translating his thoughts, and still others speculated that this encounter was part of a private send-off or a welcome back, depending on which way the insider leaks leaned. That day, meanwhile, fashion analysts noted SUGA's deliberately neutral palette and Chris's signature casual look as a nod to timeless humility, a style that refused to scream for attention yet drew all eyes toward its simplicity. The image continued to circulate, but it was the captionless reposts from industry figures and fellow musicians that gave it extra weight. Photographers, producers, and background players sharing it with a single emoji or no comment at all, letting its significance breathe, letting the audience feel rather than be told what to feel. And while agencies kept quiet, refusing to feed speculation, it was clear something had shifted, not necessarily in logistics or contracts but in tone. The tone of realignment, of hearts and headlines finding a shared pulse once again. And now, as July unfolded and festival lineups solidified, the question wasn't just whether Coldplay and BTS would collaborate again, but whether this reunion signaled a broader emotional return to music making rooted in real connection, something beyond market strategy, something that looked like healing. And as fans rewatched old performances and shared new interpretations of that single hug, one couldn't help but feel that this was less about two stars in an airport and more about two artists, perhaps even two friends, choosing to meet the world on their own emotional terms, and in doing so, reminding everyone watching that even in an age of constant digital noise, a simple embrace captured under sterile airport lighting can still feel like the loudest, clearest sound of all. And as the hours turned into days, the narrative did not fade but evolved with surprising grace, not into frenzy but into something closer to reflection, as more voices from both the music industry and the wider public began to chime in, not to speculate with certainty but to acknowledge the rare emotional clarity of the moment. And while Chris Martin returned to his hotel without a press statement and SUGA remained silent on social media, the resonance of that hug continued to echo in unexpected ways, from fans sharing personal stories of how their music had helped them through isolation to cultural commentators dissecting the quiet power of nonverbal communication between artists who have seen the world at its loudest. And this was perhaps the most profound outcome of all, that in a world increasingly obsessed with noise, likes, algorithms, and timed announcements, it was a wordless gesture captured under fluorescent lights in a nearly empty terminal that reminded people of the reason they fell in love with these artists to begin with, not for their metrics but for their humanity. And now as whispers of upcoming stages, performances, or even shared studio time continue to trickle quietly across private fandom spaces, one thing remains undeniably clear. Something real passed between them that morning, and the world, for a moment, noticed not because it was told to look, but because it needed to feel. And in that feeling, even without a single song being played, music was already happening.